This is Career Coaching X's and O's, and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson, the founder and thought leader at Sierra Consulting, a small business strategy and technology consulting firm. A small part of our practice is executive coaching. These episodes are the summation of some of those sessions. The title of today's episode, The 7 Steps You Should Take Before You Leave Corporate America to Become an Entrepreneur. According to an article in prnewswire.com by Claudia Newcorn, women, especially black women, represent the fastest growing group of new entrepreneurs. Now, knowing that 90% of all startups fail, we want to make sure that if you are one of those individuals considering leaving corporate America to launch your new business, that you implement these 7 steps first. These are the same 7 steps that I followed when I left corporate America, a great job with great benefits, to launch my last startup that I eventually sold to a Fortune 500 company. The first step, develop a business plan. You improve the odds of success of your business by 70%, according to the SBA, if you just have a plan and a group of advisors. So do that. Develop a plan that includes a real serious look at the market, a deep examination of your competitors, and has a real financial forecast with some sensitivities. Be prepared to shop that business plan around, certainly before you leave your job. I shopped mine around to almost 20 different individuals with expertise in the field that I wanted to go in. They gave me terrific feedback that made me rewrite many sections of the business plan. It was thinking that I needed. Why? Because I was able to include some signposts in the business plan that if I saw those signposts, it either confirmed that I was on the right track or told me that I was moving down a losing path and that I needed to recalibrate. So I want you to prepare that kind of business plan because it will be your roadmap to helping you navigate the treacherous road that is being an entrepreneur. What's the second thing I want you to do? I want you to develop a resources list that goes along with that business plan. What do I mean? To implement every plan, there's a certain amount of resources that are assumed you may have when you launch the business. Assumed because many of you in corporate America assume that if you need to fly somewhere, the business is going to pay for that ticket and pay for your hotel and bring you back safely to your home after you've attended a conference, attended a sales pitch. You have to make the assumption that you're going to need those same types of resources to launch your business. I did the exact same thing. I made a list. I'm going to need to travel. Is that baked into the assumptions of my business plan? Or can I leverage my existing job to minimize the impact of the need for some of those resources? So I made sure when I was still a part of corporate America to sign up for every rewards program I could sign up for. I had 1 million miles with Delta, 1 million points with Marriott, and 1 million points with Hyatt. I could fly anywhere I needed to go and get a free room as well without having to come out of pocket to launch my business. Those types of resources and that type of forward thinking helped me to extend the runway for my startup. What's the third thing I want you to do? I don't want you to leave your job. I want you to stay in corporate America, building up those resources that I just mentioned, working on that business plan until you have an MVP, a minimum viable product. I don't want you trying to develop that when you don't have revenue or income coming in, and when you don't have access to build up resources as you recalibrate and relaunch that product as you learn more about the industry. Do it in your spare time. Some of the world's greatest companies were started from dorm rooms and garages. My last startup started from my garage. What's the fourth thing? Continue from an MVP to a soft launch. A soft launch means you're not rolling out everywhere you can possibly roll out. You're extending the market to test to see if your assumptions are good and sound before you invest a lot of money. So continue that soft launch. What's the fifth thing I want you to do? When you do initiate that hard launch and give up your corporate job, I immediately want you to go get a part-time job with health benefits. Now, if you've read my book, Guerrillapreneur, Small Business Strategy for Davids Wanting to Defeat Goliaths, I have a whole chapter on the types of jobs that you can work either in the day or at night while you're running your startup that will give you access to health benefits. Being an entrepreneur is stressful. You don't need to make it any more stressful by not having a safety net. So work at Starbucks, get the benefits, and launch your startup. What's the sixth thing I recommend you do? This is another big point I make in my book, Guerrillapreneur, the Small Business Strategy for Davids Wanting to Defeat Goliaths, is that I want you to sign up for platforms that pay you back for spending money on your startup. Wow, you're saying, how can I do that, Mark, even while I'm working in corporate America? There are lots of platforms out there that can give you money back for money that you spend and help you make the transition to entrepreneur a lot easier. And let me tell you what I did. When I started down the path of being an entrepreneur, I didn't want my family to suffer and I didn't want my kids' education to suffer. So I signed up for youpromise.com. The letter U, promise.com, all one word. What happens on that site is if you log in all your credit cards and shop online through that site at all the places that you already frequent when you want to buy stuff. Amazon, Walmart, Target, any of the stores that you normally would shop at and that are registered on this platform, you can get back 3 to 5% of everything you spend through this website. And here's what else is really cool. They can invest that in a 529 account for your kids. Oh yeah, it gets even cooler. You can have your relatives sign up for this site and everything they spend can go towards your kids' education as well. I did something even better. I put a Discover card on the uPromise site, and not only did I get the 3 to 5% for shopping at places that I like to shop and buying gas at the places that are registered on the uPromise website like Exxon and Mobil stations, I got back the additional 5% from Discover and from my American Express card that gave cash back. So I was getting back 10% of everything that I spent on my business for my kids' education and in cash that I could then turn around and reinvest in my business. What does that do? It extends your runway. It helps you stay around longer so that you can succeed in this new business. What's the final thing I want you to do? This one's a little trickier, but it makes sense. And I spend a whole chapter on it in my book, Guerrillapreneur, Small Business Strategy for Davids Who Want to Defeat Goliaths. Yeah, I know you've heard it 3 times, but I want you to hear it 3 more because it's an important guide on helping you launch your business. The 7th thing you should do is make sure you have enough money to launch your business. Now, I have some tips and techniques on how much that should be. There are experts out there that say it takes 3 years to establish a brand. So at a minimum, you need to have enough cash to be around 3 years for your brand to start to resonate with your target market. But I do have some other tips that you should consider. If you're launching a business that requires a minimal amount of capital. So it's a service-oriented business, like being a barber or doing someone's hair. It doesn't require a lot of capital. I suggest that you have 6 times the amount of capital required to launch a business like that on hand when you begin your hard launch. Because it's a services business, you don't need as much capital, but 6 times the amount that you will need, you should have on hand to make sure you can ride out the rough times and have the amount of money needed to last 3 years to establish that brand. What about those high capital businesses? Those that require a lot of infrastructure, where you may have to buy ovens or buildings or manufacture cars if you're Tesla. I suggest you have 10 times the amount of capital you need for a high capital business to stick around for 3 years. Why is that? Because in my view of the world, high capital businesses tend to be low transaction businesses. The volume of those transactions are fairly low compared to low capital businesses, which have very frequent high volume transactions. McDonald's is probably the exception. You have a lot of capital invested in those types of businesses, and they get lots of transactions throughout the day. So that's more time to help establish word of mouth branding for your business. But in those cases, I want you to have 10 times the amount of capital needed to launch the business on hand so that you can survive. In the year 2000, I launched my last startup. By the year 2012, we had a $20 million run rate and on our way to selling that company to a Fortune 500 business because I took these 7 steps seriously. If you're in corporate America right now and you've decided the corner suite is not for you and that being an entrepreneur is, please follow these 7 steps and consider reading my book, Guerrillapreneur, the small business strategy for Davids wanting to defeat Goliaths. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, hit subscribe. I know you will share the episode with your colleagues because the best people listen to this podcast. Tell us the issues you're struggling with in your career, and we will research them, and we might even do a podcast episode about them. If you need more support for your career, please find us on the web at ceyero.com, CEYERO.com, and let us help you develop a plan for your career. If you like career coaching X's and O's, you may also like some of my other podcasts. Guerrillapreneur, the art of waging small business warfare. If you're an executive and you no longer want the corner office, but are looking to start your own business, Guerrillapreneur is the podcast for you. Also, gigging, everything in the sharing economy. For those of you who follow the sharing economy, work in the sharing economy, or looking to launch your own sharing economy startup, that's the podcast for you. News and predictions about the sharing economy. So check those 2 out. If you like this podcast, you may get a lot out of those 2 podcasts as well. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Ceyero Consulting. This has been Career Coaching X's and O's, and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson, founder and thought leader at Ceyero Consulting.